Hello, my name is Andrew Cox. I am a real estate investor. Some of you know me, some of you don't, and I'd like to get to know you better. I've had many conversations of late on the phone and Zoom calls, just getting to know people, and of course, a lot of the questions are how did you get started in real estate? So I thought I would put together a bit of a video series on my journey up to this point and then proceeding from this point forward. Um, so starting with my backstory, how I got into real estate, I around 2016, I started to think about retirement actually, and it wasn't really a thought about real estate or wealth or growing myself to become a mogul or anything like that. It was just simply I didn't have any money, and where was I going to get it? And being that I was at the time around in my late 30s, I was sort of halfway through my life and realized I only had 20, 25 years left until retirement, and looked at my RSPs, which were minuscule at the time because I had used all my money for buying a house with a first-time homebuyers program. So basically, it was like starting from scratch in saving and repaying that money just to get to zero, and then starting to build up from what I previously had. So the whole idea of saving money sort of got into my head and thinking, geez, it took me that long to save that much, and now I have to start over again. So I started doing some research on the internet about retirement, and generally speaking, when you're looking at retirement, you come across investment, and you get real estate or stocks. And to my mind, there's nothing wrong with stocks necessarily. That may be a topic for a different video, in that you don't have any control over what happens in the stock market. But anyway, so I started doing some research. I didn't like stocks, so then real estate was something I was interested in. I always kind of liked the idea of having property. So I came across the Rich Dad Poor Dad book, and pretty much that's the number one thing when you get real estate investment. So I started to I listened to that on Audible, and just on a side note, the I came about Audible because my company moved, and I thought, what am I going to do with my time? Because I had over an hour commute each way, and decided, when am I going to waste this time in the car? So I started listening to Audible, and it's a great way to sort of bang out a couple of books every other week or whatever, and learn something while you're just killing time. Anyway, so the Rich Dad Poor Dad book, got me really thinking, and it led me in a direction that I hadn't really thought about, which was, just wealth generation, and not even so much retirement, but just a different way to think about your finances and growing your net worth. So I listened to that, and then it led me to some other books. Audible, started looking up real estate books, investment books, wealth books. And funny enough, when you look up all those books, you start to go down a bit of a path of mindset and wealth, not just from a monetary sense, but a sort of a holistic sense, and mindset really comes in. And I kept coming across books that, although they were on wealth and becoming a millionaire, they all had chapters on mindset, they had chapters on exercise, relationships, so on and so forth. I mean, I started getting into books like The Secret, and speaking to the universe, and affirmations and meditation, and it really became a whole life transformation. So I would recommend, if you haven't already sort of explored those aspects, that you do so. Anyway, getting back to the path that I took, um, I ended up reading about in couple of years, about 100 books on those various topics, and I, of course, was all over the Bigger Pockets podcasts, and they have a whole series of books that they put out, which are great. But I realized that it was all very American, as most people do realize, and I wanted some Canadiana content just to make sure that this wasn't an American thing, and that, although we can't buy houses for $38,000 and don't pay any taxes because of a 1041 exchange and all this sort of stuff, I wanted to see how it works in Canada. So around the same time, I think it was beginning of 2017, I came across Facebook or Instagram or something. So I went to the free 2-hour seminar and then signed up for the weekend boot camp. And that was pretty valuable. It was 3 days, and it was everything you could want to know about real estate investing summarized in a weekend. And I didn't sign up for the full membership because I thought I could use my money better buying a house. Later, now my mindset has changed a bit in that you have to pay to play, and you really compress time that way. But anyway, at the time I didn't, and I just kept reading and listening to podcasts and so on and so forth. So in about March of 2017, I got to the point where, analysis paralysis had sort of run its course. By this time I had been researching real estate for almost a year, I think. And so I bought my first property. And in November, I bought my second property, and I was hooked. I made a lot of mistakes on the first property, and I'm going to do a separate video just on the lessons I learned from my first property. But anyway, after I bought my second property, I thought, oh great, I've renovated these two properties. Actually, the first property I didn't renovate because it was fully tenanted. But the second property I renovated. And then I think, oh, my money's tied up in that. Well, I better refinance it. So the one thing I didn't realize is that I had reached the end of my debt service allowance. My debt service ratio was maxed out, 42% or whatever it is. So I had my primary residence and a mortgage on that. I had my first rental property and a mortgage on that. And I had my second property and a mortgage, and I was done. Like most people, you realize that the hard way is that you can't really do all this on your own. So in order to do any sort of leveraging, I had to wait for my next tax year for when the rents showed up on my T4 and became, real to the banks. During this time, my second property, just as a tidbit, it caused me no problems whatsoever. The first property was nothing but problems from day one. And what I will say is, don't buy a boarding house, and you'll hear more about that when I do the next video. So it took me about 3 years of dealing with problems on the first property to stabilize it. During that time, I went through different brokers trying to figure out different things and different scenarios with my real estate agent and property manager, and just trying to figure out, what am I going to do here? How am I going to dig myself out of this hole? And it ended up kind of coming down to I put it up for sale. I was one of those real estate agents or real estate investors that just had enough, and I don't know enough to get myself out of this. So I put it up for sale. As it turns out, that was probably one of the better things I could do, because the offers I was getting were basically what I paid for the property several years ago, and I would stand to lose, especially with realtor commissions, lose quite a bit of money. But all of the offers were coming in, something on the offer to sale that says the property will be offered vacant. Now the thing is, I couldn't do that, and nobody would sign. Nobody would sign saying that they were moving into the property, which is the only way that you can guarantee get tenants out in that scenario. But it dawned on me that if everybody wants this property vacant, um, whoever moves in, if they do finally, they are going to kick all the tenants out anyway. So I got the idea, combination of the previous education and the idea of cash for keys. So I said to the tenants, I said, look, any of the offers that I have, they've all been too low and I haven't taken them, but they've all been for vacant possession, owner occupied. So if I sell this property, you're going to have to leave. So I said, I would like to offer a win-win scenario where I will pay you. There's 5 tenants in the property. I will pay you each to leave, and once the property is vacant, then I don't have to sell it. I can fix it up and try to salvage a higher value, get the money out of the property that I needed to get out. So they ended up all taking it, and I said, okay, fuck it, I'm going to change it back to a single family home, rent it to a nice family, and in 2019 I ended up converting it back, and I haven't had a problem since. And that was February 2019, so it's a year later. Not quite a year later, but anyway, no problems. So up until this point, like I said, I had just bought properties with like down payment, then mortgage, and no plan for how I was going to refi out of it. And I ended up getting stuck. The banks wouldn't give me money. And currently, actually, I still have over $100,000 in equity in both of those properties. And I've only just realized how to get it out. But I'll talk about that in a minute. So I still destined, or in my heart of hearts, I still thought real estate was valuable, even though my resolve was unwavered. So come hell or high water, I was going to continue doing this. Now, I didn't like my job, and I was trying to find ways out of my job. And over the years of the past, like sort of 2018, 2019, I was investigating ways of like side hustles that could become permanent hustles, or segues out of my job into another career. I started an online Shopify store for drop shipping. That didn't really suit me. It's easy to set up, but what they don't tell you is that the marketing part of it is actually quite challenging. Anyway, I wasn't that passionate about it. And then I came to the idea that, real estate was my passion. Right from when I was a teenager, I used to watch Homes on Homes, and what's the other guy? Brian Palmer. And I would watch HGTV for hours. And I always wanted to work on my family's house, and my mother wouldn't let me renovate the inside. But she said, you can go nuts outside. So I redid patios and built sheds and decks and did gardens, features, and little rooms and subdecks and bar and bonfire pits. And I just went to town on the backyard. And of course, whenever buddies needed help at their parents' house, and then once we started, all having our own houses, working on decks and patching drywall or whatever. And I always had this burning idea of like having properties, like have a bunch of properties, land, really resonated with me. So it finally dawned on me. It's like, you've had one consistent dream your entire life, which has to do with houses and land to some degree. So I thought, okay, real estate agent. That's it. Researched real estate agent, had interviews with brokerages to get a feel for the day in the life of a real estate agent, watched YouTube videos on the day in the life of a real estate agent. I'd known people that had become real estate agents, reached out on Facebook and talked to them about it. And everybody seems to like it who is a real estate agent. I was a bit apprehensive about the amount of hustle, and that it's a high failure rate industry, and that most of the top producers, there's sort of like 5 or 10% of overall realtors, and there's 50,000 in Toronto alone with the GTA. Anyway, despite all that, I decided to try it out. I signed up for the um, OREA Pro course. I studied the first course. I took the first test. I got 85% or something like that. Um, but I found it like I wasn't that enthusiastic about that either. Um, just didn't feel right. So then I thought, well, I'm handy. I like to work on houses. Maybe I should become a home inspector. So then I don't have to do the work necessarily, but I know a lot about the building envelope, the structure of a house, what it takes to keep it up, and I actually know how to fix a lot. I'll be perfect. So then I went on to the Carson Dunlop program, and I signed up for, and I bought the first module and studied that, and ended up taking the first course in that. And it just seemed actually pretty stuffy. And I mean, I talked to a bunch of home inspectors, and they seemed to all like it, but it seemed to be very rigid. There's so many things to know, and yet nothing is for sure. It's a strange industry because there's no cut and dry boundaries for anything. So I didn't end up doing that. Anyway, so all of those things didn't end up doing. I was thinking, what am I going to do next? So I started a handyman business. I said, you know what? I'll just on the side after work on the weekends, I'll just fix up people's decks and do some painting and just get a little extra cash and see where that goes. Anyway, not too much longer. I did that for about 6 months, and around October 2019, my company merged with or bought out another company and merged, and they started to lay a few people off, and lo and behold, I was one of them. But was I disappointed? No, I wasn't. I didn't like that job anyway. So I thought, well, I don't really want to get back into the industry I was in. I didn't like. I hadn't liked it for a long time. It's kind of a shrinking industry. It's the printing industry. And I thought, oh, I'm going to make this handyman thing work. I'm going to go market it full time, because there was lots of jobs that I couldn't take because I didn't have the time. So I did that, and like gangbusters. I did from October to January. I did $15,000 worth of work just out of the gate. So I thought, this is great. But I also recognized that I really liked the real estate investment side of things that I was already doing. And I thought, okay, now I've got some dedicated time. I'm going to really go at this too. So I was using the home handyman stuff as some income, but I was spending an equal amount of time researching real estate investment more acutely in the sort of GTA, the Southern Ontario market, and very specifically. So since I was in City Investors Club a few years back anyway, and I got this invite to a wealth hacker event, which that would change my life, actually. So it was the beginning of when an organization called Cashflow Tribe, they just started marketing in October, and I think I attended it was in November. And anyway, it was Ben Morrison and Matt McKeever joined up together, who were both big real estate people in Southern Ontario. And they started this new company to help new investors get into the industry and help existing investors just network and sort of level up their game. So after I joined the Cashflow Tribe, there was a lot of really personal attention. There's accountability calls dedicated with just Matt and Ben. There's been some modifications to that, but more or less the same. They have all their content just went through the roof. They both poured everything they had into this and just gave so much value. I was in courses and boot camps and seminars, and I just learned so much about what it takes to do this in my own backyard, rather than sort of American content that just sort of seemed like that's something that's done in another country and everything works out for everybody in the US because it's, you know, fully capitalist and there's no regulations, but it can all be done here. And it was through Cashflow Tribe primarily that I learned a lot of that stuff. So I learned that networking is key, and partnerships, and you know, the value of video and telling your story, you know, letting people know who you are. I even leveled up and hired a coach, Corey McKinnon, who's helping me immensely, just focusing my attention and keeping me on track, and giving me lots of great tips. It's a very personal approach. Cashflow Tribe is fantastic. A little bit more of a group setting. You can join their council, which is a little bit more intimate, but it is still a group setting. It's more of a mastermind group than a coaching, or in my impression anyway. So basically, Corey is helping me start an actual investing business. So that's what I've been doing for the past, 4 months or so. I incorporated a company and got websites and all sorts of stuff. And since January, I have been involved in 4 deals. They haven't all completed, of course, but I just finished my first student renovation and got the refi coming in next Friday. I have a partnership out in Nova Scotia where I funded the deal in order to get 50% or the profit from the gain from the flip. And I have 2 more properties. One's closed that we're starting renovations shortly, and another one closes in a couple of months. So I mean, my education and my throughput, my work, my investments have just accelerated immensely, and I'm really looking forward to the future. And yeah, so sorry for the long-winded story, but that's how I came to be. Thanks for listening. Wait for the next video. Ooh, and subscribe.